Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney or Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends. Today, I have for you Book 2 in the supposed Holy Trinity of the Star Wars Expanded Universe, the only books that were good in the Star Wars universe, according to some people. The Timothy Zahn Thrawn trilogy, Book 2, Dark Force Rising. So, we've reached the middle book in the trilogy. Now, here's the thing. This book suffers from what a lot of trilogies suffer from, the mid-chapter. This doesn't apply to everything, but it does apply to a lot of things. The only reason Star Wars is the exception is because of the sole thing you learn in Episode 5 being such a big um, point for the series that would influence, the prequel stuff, and it would influence Episode 6, which was the point. Because the point of a middle chapter is it's kind of that down spire where you kind of have the heroes at like kind of the lowest point, but then you also have a big revelation or something, just that will advance the plot. You set things up in a major way for the finale, so the middle chapter always feels a little sluggish in comparison to the rest. Now, because of the expert directing and acting and everything involved with Empire Strikes Back, that is an exception. But for example, when you talk about Lord of the Rings, just before I get into the review itself, which is a trilogy as well, people like all the books, but the Two Towers usually tends to be the. I don't hear that many people saying Two Towers is my favorite book or Two Towers is my favorite film, right? It's either Fellowship of the Ring, where everything begins, or Return of the King, the conclusion. But a lot of things in Return of the King are set up in the Two Towers, or plot threads are being started toward that conclusion, and that's just kind of how middle things work, and that's why it can kind of get muddled. Now, that's not an excuse for the book. I'm just saying that it's not the only book to suffer this. I think it's still a good book. I think it is a downgrade from Heir to the Empire, and I can completely understand why people found themselves a bit bored with it. I'll admit I did too at times, but I can see what it's setting up for the finale. And there's still a lot of good merits in here to begin with. So, getting into the story proper, we are in book 2, so taking place after the end of the first book. We already have all our new characters introduced and everything, so we just move forward from here. We had Leia being attacked by the Nogri in the first book. That was the whole one of the big things of the first book. In this book, we actually get to learn more about the Nogri. We get to learn about their home, about their society, about their people, and we get to learn the history, what happened to their planet. And in doing so, we get basically one big story plot point here that is essential for the finale of the next book. For if this plot point did not exist, then our heroes would have lost in the next book. The only reason our heroes lose is due to this crucial plot point. Is it necessarily the most interesting thing in the book? Not necessarily, but it's vital, and so it's there for a reason. But it is kind of this whole thing of Leia convincing the Nogri that she is the good guy, that they shouldn't be with the Empire, and establishing them as a friendly party. And that friendly party, instead of being, an antagonist as they were in the first book, will lead to the outcome we get in the third book. And there's a lot of good Leia moments with Chewie. And it's really nice to see. And there's a lot of good Leia moments on Hongor, the Nogri planet itself, on there as well. So it's good stuff there. Meanwhile, we have crazy Jedi Sabaoth. He wants his Jedi. And he finally gets to, for a little bit, he gets Luke Skywalker to finally actually show up. And Luke tries to follow his guidance because he's a bit eccentric, but then so is Yoda in the beginning. But this guy is being a lot different than Yoda ever was. So you get to see them interact, and it's kind of interesting. And I know this was not intended because this was like the first thing really in the expanded universe, or the first thing that would really be like kind of like used as a baseline for a lot of things. But thanks to the expanded universe being one cohesive whole, it did actually make me start to rethink some conversations. Like speaking of the whole Leia and Chewie moment, it made me think about like when she's talking to the Nogri matriarch about I can't even imagine sending my kids out to war or sending out my kids to die. I've sent friends to die. I could imagine doing that to my kids. New Jedi Order. The New Jedi Order has now put more impact into that line, making me. Then you also have other lines of Chewie giving his light debt to not only Han but to Luke and Leia and to her unborn children, and it just also hits a bit harder knowing that event down the line. And then with Sabiath, I found it. This wasn't intended. This was written first. I'm just saying, Sabiath is crazy for sure, absolutely, and he was always an arrogant prick. Thanks to Outbound Flight, we know this. But can he see the future a little bit? Because he, in his weird sort of like twisted way of trying to go about things, he wants to make the Jedi strong because he knows that lesser people fear them, or what he perceives to be lesser people, right? And because he's very arrogant and pompous and all that. But, and this is mostly due to Palpatine's manipulations in the prequels, but there was also legitimate things that the everyday man that was not a Jedi or didn't really have that many interactions with Jedi had some opinions about the Jedi, and those tended to be negative. You know, Palpatine helped flourish those negative feelings, but that was already a thing. That was something that was kind of already in place. If we're talking chronologically, since the early days of Darth Plagueis, and I remember specifically there was something in Jedi Apprentice of all things by Jude Watson, where this taxi driver or something is really annoyed with Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan needs this car or something for some reason to go do something and just takes it without asking. And a lot of Jedi did stuff like that. And he's just like, what the hell? Right? And it's a minor thing, it's never brought up again, but stuff like that happened in the Old Republic, and, Jedi, were superhero. It's kind of like the whole Civil War effect with Marvel, and then everyday people, were like, this is not right. This is unfair. So anyway, all that to say, way down the line, we get to Fate of the Jedi, which I have very, very mixed feelings on. Even as someone who likes that era, a lot of things annoy me there. But something similar does kind of go down with that whole sort of scenario of you know, the general populace disliking the Jedi. And so I having all that foreknowledge just kind of like wove its way into that. And I know that wasn't the intention, but it just got me thinking. Because he is a very powerful Force adept, there's no denying that. So is it possible that he's, in his scrambled, crazy mind can see some of this stuff that will come down the line? And whether or not he has any merit to that. Now, of course, his way of going about things is not good, but there is some sort of sense in that logic if he's thinking about the fact that the Jedi are just going to go down a similar road of being untrusted again. So if they're not going to trust us anyway, it might as well just be the ones on top and frick whatever they want anyway, because they don't know what's best for them. We do. And I don't know, I just found that a little bit interesting. But that's really off topic from the book. I just, I wanted to mention that because I thought it was a really interesting thought, and I shared it in a group chat. But then, of course, we have Han and Lando, and they're kind of doing a whole bunch of stuff. Um, the most important addition, I think, to this book, besides the Nogri plot that we're given here, is that we get introduced to a character named Garm Bel Ilbis, who is a Corellian, or was a Corellian senator. And he has a whole backstory with Mon Mothma and stuff that we get concluded in the next book. But he's a very important character that is not really used that much after this point. But he's a very interesting character, and it's another props to Zahn for just being able to create, like, just new characters that are just really interesting. And he's a really interesting guy. But the essential conflict, I guess I should say, for the book is that there are this ancient, or not ancient, but it's like Clone Wars era Katana fleet, like this massive fleet thing without getting too much into spoilers about it. And so it's kind of a race with our heroes near the end to get this thing because the New Republic, it's a new republic, so it fosters on brokering deals and stuff and all that. But right now, shipyards and stuff are either still controlled by the Empire or they're selling the highest bidder, and the New Republic doesn't have all the money in the world, so you know it's a race to get these free ships basically. But Thrawn's just a little bit faster and obtains it, so that way he'll be a bigger threat for the finale of the next book, which is kind of the big gist of that. And then we also learn about the Sparty cloning cylinders, which can clone people much faster than like the Commodians could on Commodians could on Camino. Sorry about that. It's a lot faster process. So that whole thing is something that they're worried about, and the book ends on a cliffhanger. Um, but of course, then we have the Nogri, which Thrawn doesn't know about, so that's very important for the next book. But I guess it's kind of scatterbrained here, but it's a slow book. It's a slow book. It's a slow burn. It's not as enjoyable as the last one was. I'll be fair to admit that. I gotta be honest. I forgot a good portion of stuff that happened in this book when I started to reread it. Because when I read Heir of the Empire, I was like, oh yeah, I'm recognizing a lot of stuff I was reading, but I don't remember a lot here, and that's just because I don't think this book is very memorable. I don't think it's written badly or anything. I just think that it hasn't aged as well as I think Heir to the Empire has. Like that one's like, man, we're back in Star Wars. This one's just a bit slow, and I get why it's slow in some instances, but it did not have the same momentum that the previous book did. Then we also, of course, kind of have like this kind of alliance forming with Card. I mean, Card's still like his own man and isn't exactly friends with our characters, but you kind of see the start of that relationship that he's going to have with all of these characters. Because they get introduced in the last book, but here they're kind of like they have to work together against Thrawn. So there's a lot of moving parts here. A lot of interesting things are here, but it can also be kind of a slow burn. And it's definitely the weakest of the trilogy by far. But I don't think it's a bad book by any means. I don't really do ratings, but it's not as high as I put Heir to the Empire, which I still think is a fairly solid novel. I think this is good, but it's not. I'd say Heir to the Empire is great. Not the best, because there's way better books than Heir to the Empire, but it's good. It's great. It's solid. This I would just classify as not okay. It's above that, but it's not great. It's just it's written fine. Then there's this one other thing. It actually started to annoy me with the amount of times that Zahn used sardonically. Like it's honest, it's a lot. He uses that word like he loves this word. It's it's everywhere. It's really annoying. I don't know how I never noticed this the first time. Maybe I did. I don't remember. But it's everywhere. It's really annoying. It's like every couple chapters there's somebody that's saying he said this sardonically, or he smiled sardonically, he picked his nose sardonically. It's everywhere, man. I don't know why Zahn loves this word so much, but he uses it a ton. Like if you were to do a drinking game, you would be dead by the end of the book, man. Like there's so many uses of it. It's insane. Um, but yeah, I mean that's just a minor complaint. Um, I think the slowest part for me was the Han and Lando stuff up until they meet Garm Belobus. Then it picked up a bit, but that was really boring for me for a while, along with certain sections of the Leia plot. Though I understand why it's there. Um, but yeah, overall, really, I still enjoyed this book a ton. I'm excited to see the finale to this trilogy. I still consider this 7, 8, and 9. I consider episodes 10 and 11 Dark Empire. But, this is still a solid series. Um, I think in my overall enjoyment, I might actually prefer Dark Empire now, as funny as that might sound. But I don't think this is a bad series by any means. I don't think anybody should say that Thrawn or that the Thrawn trilogy is, um, I think it's a bit contrarian to be like, oh, it's not good. I mean, I completely understand thinking it's not, what people hype it up to be. It's not. It's not the best thing since sliced bread, but it's a solid trilogy. At least by memory. I've only read the two now, but I still think this is a really good one, and I can't wait to reread the finale with you guys. So anyway, guys, until we get to the last command, may the force be with you.